Newsroom. It's indeed time for the France 24 debate, and we're still digesting the news as it comes in. A bold breakthrough or a face-saving exercise that buys time. Eurozone leaders meeting in an emergency summit in Brussels have a deal. We know it stretches loans out over longer periods to nations that are struggling to keep afloat in a sea of red ink. We know it allows Greece to partially default on its debt if need be. The euro surging above $1.44 on the news. Problem is, the devil's in the detail. For starters, just how much are banks, insurers, investment funds contributing? Also, it's more than just money that's at stake. In some cases, it's national sovereignty. And for all of the Eurozone members, for all the EU, dare we say, it's about credibility.
We need a comprehensive solution, both for Greece and for the entire Eurozone. We cannot meet every 2 weeks to add new decisions. That means we need to find an agreement today, both on the principle and the details. And that is what we'll do.
Today, in the France 24 debate, is the euro saved? And is it worth saving? With, from London, Laurence Boone. She runs the European economics research for Bank of America Merrill Lynch. Thanks for joining us there from Europe's financial capital. Here in the studio, Giulia Cagé, economist who divides her time between Harvard University and the Paris School of Economics. Thanks for being with us. Thomas Clau, the Paris Bureau Chief for the European Council on Foreign Relations. And joining us from Bayonne in southwestern France, Laurent Pinsol, spokesperson for Debout la République. Laurent Pinsol, would you describe Debout la République as a political party or a movement?
No, it's a political party. Nicolas Dupont-Aignan is going to be a presidential candidate next year, so we will be a strong party next year.
All right, a party that's squarely against the euro, and we'll be talking more about that in a moment. The France 24 debate, which you can follow on Facebook. A lot of you have been weighing in on the conversation this Thursday, and also on Twitter, our handle at FrancoisF24. Now, before we go to our panel, let's go to Brussels and to France 24's Owen Fairclough, who's been there throughout the day. Owen, as we said at the outset, the devil's in the detail. Is this a happy ending, or, as we heard in the introduction, Jean-Claude Juncker's fears, are you back in 2 weeks for the next Last Chance Summit?
Well, I can tell you, Francois, good evening, first of all. I can tell you that here there's a feeling that these negotiations are starting to drag on a little bit. We thought we might get some sort of announcement around about 5 p.m. We're well past that now. As you say, the devil is in the detail, and we understand that the devil here is the involvement of private investors, namely those banks who've got so much at stake in this Greek crisis, namely French and German banks, who between them are the most exposed to Greek debt. Now, we've got a wide-ranging draft agreement that has some sort of private sector involvement in it. Not so much a tax on banks, that was certainly in play coming into this summit, but that idea has been cast aside now. And yet the idea is that somewhere along the line, private investors will have to take some kind of hit on their investment.
Some kind of hit, but just how much?
And that's what's being negotiated, of course. One of the ideas is to have some sort of bond buyback scheme whereby the Greek government would be able to benefit from having that debt effectively taken off its hands and the funds given back to it. But that might mean that private investors take maybe a 40% hit on their investment. We've got some key bankers here as well, Francois. It's no surprise that Joseph Ackermann, the CEO of Deutsche Bank, is here. Apparently he wasn't allowed in the negotiations. He's doing the rounds of the corridors. He will certainly want to know exactly what kind of hit financial investors take. But Francois, this is just one element of it, and I think we've seen a significant development here today. Coming into this summit, of course, all we heard was from the likes of Angela Merkel, not to expect too much. Nothing spectacular, she told us. Have we got something spectacular? Well, I'll tell you what we have got. We've got the European Financial Stability Mechanism, that giant piggy bank, if you like, that was decided around a year ago, 440 billion euros at stake, finally coming into play. These Eurozone leaders prepared to crack it open and unleash some of that funding, not just on Greece, but on other vulnerable Eurozone countries like Portugal, like Ireland. And while we're at it, why not Italy and Spain, the two countries that have been causing lots of market consternation lately? We've seen other developments as well, like the likes of Angela Merkel being persuaded to take part in bond rollovers using this stability mechanism. She didn't like that idea a few weeks ago and very, very resistant to it.
Very resistant to it. What's the feeling at the where you are? Is it Germany v. most of the rest of the Eurozone?
Well, it certainly looked that way coming into this summit, of course, which is partly why you suppose that President Nicolas Sarkozy went to Berlin for that dinner with Angela Merkel and did most of the heavy lifting in terms of negotiations. In fact, it was Sarkozy, Merkel and their European Bank President Jean-Claude Trichet who dined last night and basically put this draft agreement together. I think it's fair to say that for once, we're seeing the Eurozone leaders not just pull together, but come together with something fairly big. We're talking about lots of different things here. We're talking about lowering interest rates for Greece using this fund. Greece currently pays up to 30% on its loans, and that's partly why it's in this vicious circle of simply being crippled by debt repayments. They're talking now about lowering those interest rates down to as little as 3%, much more manageable, and extending the kind of time scale that Greece has for paying back loans, in fact, doubling it to some 15 years. So you can see there's breathing room for this country, which is what it needs right now.
All right, Owen Fairclough, many thanks for that update from Brussels. Do dip in when we get those leaders coming out of their closed-door session. Julia Cagé, listening to what Owen says, obviously we're not in the room, but do you think this is a game changer, this summit this Thursday?
I'm not sure. It was kind of disappointing during the day. Like, the first disappointment was about the disapparition, like in the discussion of a tax on the banks. Like, taxing the banking sector would have been a way to make a real participation of the financial markets. And you know, now they are saying we are going to have the financial markets participating in the agreement. Perhaps there will be some partial default, but it is not clear at all. And this would be only a solution for Greece, you know. And then after, if you have another crisis in Portugal, in Ireland, in Spain, we will have to negotiate another time with the banks in order to have them participating.
So you think Jean-Claude Juncker's nightmare may come true, that we will be back in 2 weeks?
This is possible. It is not sure. We have to wait like tonight. One thing they proposed today, the possibility for the European Stability Fund, you know, to come on the secondary market and to buy all the Greek debt, kind of a sort of a first step toward Eurobonds. This would be a way to solve the crisis for a long time.
But does that make the ECB sort of the equivalent of Ireland's scheme to have a bad bank?
No, this won't be the ECB. Like, we had last year the ECB buying the bonds on the secondary market. But today it is the European Stability Fund that is going to come on this market to buy the bonds. This is a way to mutualize the risk. You won't have anymore like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 27 different debts in Europe. We don't have that in the US, you know. We don't have a debt for Alabama. We don't have a debt for New Jersey, another one for California. And then after you have a big debt for the whole US. But it is not risky because like US is a safe country. Europe would be a safe country. But all the countries have to share their debt together.
Let me get your reaction, Laurence Boone. You heard Julia Cagé say she feels that the bank's getting off lightly under what we've seen so far of the deal.
Well, I think we can share. Sorry, did you say Laurent or Laurence?
Laurence.
Okay. I think market will probably react positively in the short term and then react less positively in the medium term. Where I can share Julia's assessment is that indeed it's sort of disappointing because, as you rightly mentioned before, there is little detail or not enough to really understand the implication of each element of this communique, which is not official yet, so there might be some changes, but the program, that there is a program for Greece is good. That there is intervention on the second market of the FSF is potentially positive, but we need to know the detail, and I'll come back to that. And the fact is that for the moment, we don't know at all what form will take the private sector involvement. what the communique looks like it's about to say is that the private sector involvement would only apply to Greece and not necessarily to Portugal and Ireland. There's a sentence in the communique saying that all other states than Greece commit to reimburse their debt. The fact that it remains voluntary makes it a lot hazardous for all the reasons that have been discussed before.
So hang on a second, Laurence. You're a banker,
yeah?
And you're saying you think there should be a bit more pressure put on those who owe money, including private investors?
I think everybody from Greece to the public authorities and also to private investors who have lent to Greece indeed share the responsibility of the Greek very high indebtedness, right? I mean, I think nobody can say otherwise, and nobody is saying otherwise. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody wants to share the burden, but Greece got indebted too much. They're paying a high price for that today in terms of reforms that they have to implement. Probably investors lend too much money to Greece. One excuse might be that they thought that the euro area there was a fiscal solidarity, but that was not in the treaty, so they should not have thought that. And the other thing is, I mean, as taxpayers, we're all benefiting from the euro. Therefore, if there is a price to pay to make sure that the euro area is functioning well and that the euro is and remains the safe money with all the benefit that it has brought to us, then as taxpayer, we should also be paying a share. Yeah.
Let me ask you, Thomas Clau, the single currency. You heard what Laurence Boone just said. You saw that it was trading above $1.44. What's the credibility, though, of the single currency at the tail end of today?
Well, as Laurence, I think, was saying quite rightly, the initial reaction of the market has been positive to what has leaked out of the meeting, which in itself is, of course, encouraging. So that the first mention of the word default hasn't triggered an instant panic, and I can imagine that it is clear that leaders watch this very carefully, and the leaks were a way to test initial market reaction. But the devil may well be in the detail. We have to see how this plays out tonight, but also over the next few days. And I would be surprised, we must all hope so, but I would be surprised if the decisions taken today initiate the beginning of a swift beginning to the end of the Eurozone crisis and a return of full confidence in the markets. That would obviously be the ideal scenario, but let's wait and see. That said, what is remarkable throughout this crisis is that despite the enormous difficulties leaders have had in agreeing time and time again, despite the foot dragging, in particular the German foot dragging, because despite all the squabbling and the uncertainty, I think one can say that the fundamental gamble of the financial markets has been that the euro will pull through, which is quite extraordinary when you see the degree of skepticism, that has rightly accompanied leaders' efforts, and the degree of skepticism that initially accompanied the launch of the euro. So, despite the terrible political spectacles we've been all witnessing over the last year and more, financial markets seem to bet, I think, that the euro, one way or the other, will pull through and survive. And the option which some British Eurosceptics and others have discussed at times or pushed for, and indeed some people in the German debate, that Greece, for instance, should be pushed out of the Eurozone, is not one to which the markets rightly, I think, have attached much credibility, because they trust the leaders' commitment in the end to do what is necessary to keep the show going on.
Keep the show going on. European markets greeting the news positively at the close, although it's not what you'd call a huge buying frenzy. Most of the markets up roughly around 1%. The euro up, as we mentioned, and oil, by the way, above $100 a barrel. Laurent Pinsol, as things stand, is this the best possible outcome in the short term for Europe's citizens?
I think it's the least worst plan, I would say, because, of course, I tend to think that the best solution would be to move back to national currencies and organize a partial default for the countries that need it. But at least, thanks to Angela Merkel, we did not go to bad solutions like an increase of the ESF or Eurobonds. And I I am also very thankful for Angela Merkel to have fought to have a participation of private creditors. And I think that's one of the main conclusions of that summit. It's that Germany got its way completely against the will of France and the ECB, and the whole agenda of the German government has went through without taking into account the points of the ECB and the French government.
Now, disagreeing with Laurent Pinsol is the French foreign minister. Is the euro worth saving? No question, but yes, says Alain Juppé. Let's take a listen.
I do have hope. We don't have any other choice but to find a solution in order to stop international speculation and to stabilize the Eurozone. It's in everybody's interest. If this Eurozone explodes, it would be a catastrophe.
And by the way, even the British, who aren't in the Eurozone, were rooting for a deal this Thursday. Take a listen.
We're not an island economy. We can't turn our back on the rest of the world. And I think it is extraordinarily important to remember that a prosperous and strong Eurozone is absolutely necessary for a strong and prosperous United Kingdom. A breakup of the single currency would have dramatic and catastrophic consequences for millions of people across the European continent, including in the United Kingdom.
Laurence Boone, as a French woman living in London, are you surprised over the past days and weeks seeing how many otherwise very Eurosceptic English are suddenly rooting for a deal? All right, we seem to have lost Laurence Boone in London.
Oh, sorry. I don't think it's any surprise. Since the beginning, since the onset of the euro, I think there was a misunderstanding of how a monetary union could work without any fiscal union. And since the beginning of the crisis, it's not that market have called for the end of the euro, as I heard the previous speaker say. It's just that market do not understand how this type of union can work without fiscal union. And what the market has been looking for the past 2 years is further advances in economic governance, in the ability to take decision and in the ability to take such a burden. And I think in this respect, if the market has positively reacted today, in spite of the fact that there is still PSI on the table and then we are still talking about a selective default, it's because of the enlargement of the FSF. Now the market may have overreacted because we don't know yet how this enlargement will take place. And for example, if this enlargement was to support a widening of Italian or Spanish spreads, if the FSF was to do that on the secondary market, it might require more money than what it has now at its disposal. Practically, it also needs to raise the money. But the market is welcoming the fact that there is something in this communique which looks like a step forward towards more fiscal solidarity.
Towards more fiscal solidarity, fiscal union, that's a braver measure. When we come back, we're going to talk about what's brave and what's not when it comes to political decision makings going forth. We're talking about the euro in the France 24 debate.